Welcome to the Grandpa Channel, where stories don't fade, they get recorded. I'm Steve Harris. My grandkids call me Rivers. This podcast is where grandpas and grandchildren pull up a chair, turn on a mic, and let her rip. Grandpa stories are chock full of wisdom, life lessons, and frankly, funny as hell. Your stories are the magic elixir to help your grandkids navigate Mr. Toad's wild ride, aka life. Let's Grandpa. Hi there, parents. I've got a quick question for you. What if your kid had a real connection with their grandpa? Not just holiday small talk or voicemail memories, but real presence. We put together a free guide called Steal Our Best Plays. It's 10 legacy level ideas to help the grandpa in your kid's life show up in ways that actually matter. No lectures, no life coaching, just stories, questions, and simple prompts that work, even for the grandpas who don't think they're any good at this sort of thing. It's free, it's easy, it's fun, and it just might be the nudge that turns a good relationship into a genuinely memorable one. Go to www.thegrandpachannel.com/playbook to download it and get it straight into your inbox and to your heart. Then share, baby, share. And today we're going to talk about obituaries. Yes, obituaries. I'm a big fan, not in a morbid way, but in a meaningful way. I love the kind of obits that make you cry, laugh, and wish you'd known that person. Our guest is Mary McGreevey, known online as the Obit Lady through her social media handle, Tips from Dead People. She's gone viral for sharing everyday obituaries written with honesty, humor, and heart. You feel like you knew the person. We talk about what makes a life matter, how to preserve the stories that actually count, and why sharing the imperfect stuff in our life might be the greatest gift that you can give to your kids. Whether you're a parent, a grandkid, or someone who just wants to hold on to the good stuff before it's gone, this episode is for you. Now, let's get into it. We have a wonderful guest this morning on our show, Mary McCreevy. And Mary is affectionately known as the Obit Lady. Now, I love a good obituary, and I'll tell you a quick story to kind of introduce the show. My oldest grandson is a funny kid, mostly unintentionally funny. And one day when he was like 7 or 8 years old, I was reading the obits on the couch. And he came up to me, and it was on a Sunday before a Sunday dinner, and he said, "Hey, Rivers," that's what I'm known as, Rivers. He said, "Hey, Rivers, what are you reading?" And I said, "Well, Cam, I'm reading obituaries." And he said, "Well, what's an obituary?" And I told him what an obituary was. And he had this very quizzical look on his face. And then he looked at me and he said, "I'll bet you're glad that your picture isn't in the obit section today." And so anyway, funny kid, but I just have this love of obits. And I'd love to have you tell us, Mary, kind of how you came into this, the grand queen of obits. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you're at right now.
Well, thank you so much for that excellent introduction. Several commenters on my social media account have told me that obituaries are also referred to as the Irish sports pages. But I think a lot of people with heart really love the obituaries. And sadly, with the demise of print newspapers, it becomes harder to just lounge on the couch. So yes, my name is Mary McGreevey, and I live in Minnesota, and I grew up in South Dakota. And my mom was a journalist and a teacher in my hometown of Sioux Falls. And for a while, just a brief while, she was the obituary page editor for my hometown paper, the Sioux Falls Argus-Leader. And that would have been when I was in maybe middle school, something like that. So I think that's when I was first alerted to the idea of obituaries. And reading the print obituaries from the early 80s or late 70s in Sioux Falls, it wouldn't have been a really scintillating pack of obituaries, plus the whole pay-to-play nature of obituaries, which we could do a side chat on anytime. But I knew when I saw good ones that there was something special about that. And I often thought in a kind of a gossipy way what wasn't being said. Like if I saw, oh, this person had 2 husbands, why is the second one not mentioned? I mean, those are the things that would go through my head. And then as a young adult and beyond, I lived in 5 or 6 different cities, and I would always subscribe to the paper. I would always read the newspaper, obits like you, and I would cut out ones that, I don't know, they just struck me. I just put them in a folder, didn't ever think about it. And then a couple years ago, I was in the midst of a work project for, I was working as a video producer here in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I decided I needed a creative project. And I thought, I don't draw, I don't sing, I don't knit, I don't have any of that sort of creative ability, but what if I pulled out that old folder and did something with it? And so I went through and I threw out some, but then I thought, I'm just going to pick a social media channel and I'm going to read a couple, and my angle on this is going to be, why did I save this? What does it mean to me for my life? Not just gawking at the obituary and not just choosing viral ones, but ones that taught me something about my own life. So I have 3 daughters in their 20s, and I asked them, if I were going to do this, what social media channel do you think I should choose? And if a cringe could be audible, that was their first response. Like, please don't do this, Mom.
I know it is audible.
Yeah, that's it. That's just like petrifying for young people to think that their parents are going to leap onto a social media platform like that. But now, of course, they're my biggest fans and my in-house geek squad. But they suggested TikTok because at the time it was less curated than Instagram, less brand focused, didn't feel like you needed an aesthetic. You could be a little bit messy. So I just started recording a few very basic knowledge. I had and actually still have very little actual filming knowledge. And I did that for a few months, and each video would maybe get 100 or 200 views, which in TikTok terms is almost too embarrassing to post. But then one video hit, and I posted it and went to bed and thought, this one's kind of kooky. I don't even know if I should post it. And then the next morning, I realized it had over 1 million views and over 1,000 comments. And I think from then on, TikTok put me on like a faster highway, and then so quickly grew the account to 180 or so thousand people. And then when TikTok was going to get banned the first time, I thought, okay, I can't have all my eggs in one basket. I'm going to do Instagram and Substack too. So yeah, so that's been the journey, like improbable. Every day I think this is so crazy. I can't believe this is happening. But after that first couple videos, I got some newspaper interviews and offers to write articles like Reader's Digest and places like that about the top things I've learned from obituaries. And it's been the most fun chapter of my life, almost by far. And it's not even done yet. So anyway, that's a long answer to how did I get interested in obituaries.
I love the journey. And I was going to tell you, this is just an amateur me telling you how I determine whether an obit is good or not. And my standard is, if I read that obit and then if I think to myself, I wish I had known that person. To me, that's what really makes a good obit. But I would love to talk to a master work here on obit. What makes a good obit? And maybe give an example or two if you'd like.
Yeah, for sure. And I can send you links if you want, if you have show notes or whatever. I'm happy to send more links. But I think for me, what attracts me, the kinds of obituaries that I choose to read, it's a non-famous person, and the obituary isn't a cut and paste template. If someone has gone online and said, how do you write an obituary? And then they just substitute their details. It's not full of cliches. And I like a complicated story, because who among us isn't complicated? Who among us isn't flawed? Nobody. So I like when those details are included in obituary, because the truth is we're all going to be forgotten in 3 generations' time. So who really are we trying to impress? So I prefer an obituary that's honest to a fault sometimes. It doesn't matter if it's short or long or funny or poignant. It's not that. It's not that I insist upon a style that I like the best. It's really just those 2 simple things. They're not famous and this isn't just a resume or a template.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that big tent, it could be so many things. I've read amazing obituaries that are just a paragraph long. Even the ones that are kind of, that I call scorched earth, that are actually kind of cruel.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know what? That's honest too. That's their voice.
Yeah.
The survivor's voice. There's one obituary that I always use when people ask me to speak at conferences and groups, and her name is Trish. And Trish seemed like someone who wasn't on the corporate path of any kind. She, I think, had short employment stints at different places. But this was the first obituary that I read like this. They put in there, here's what Trish loved, colon. And then it gave a long list of things that Trish loved. Very, very detailed. David Sedaris, square-shaped bullet points, long and lean trousers from the Gap, Capri candles, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the next paragraph was, here's what Trish hated, colon. And it was, cold butter and skinny jeans and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, you don't need anything else. When people ask me, I'm not creative, how do I write an obituary? I always just say, start with a list, love, hate, and then stories will flow from there. And honestly, you could even leave it in bullet point form and I would still be cool with that. And so I love that so much that my mom passed away just a few months ago and I wrote her obituary. I could only stretch the creative limits of my somewhat traditional family so far, but I did include what she loved and what she didn't love. And that is the part of the obituary that people kept talking to me about at her funeral and afterwards. So yeah, it's the tiny things. It was not job titles or awards or never met a stranger or smile lit up a room. It was, the fact that my mom didn't like unmade beds, or she didn't like houses where they ask you to take off your shoes, that kind of thing.
Boy, I'm there. I wished I'd met your mom.
Yes. So yeah. I've shared hilarious, like you're crying laughing with humor, those kinds of obituaries. I've shared really poignant ones. We've gone into addiction and suicide and estrangement, imprisonment, all manner of things. But you're sort of left with the impression that if you really, really got to know the person, it's okay. Most people have a good next chapter, and like you say, everybody's got a story.
Everybody's got a story. And I think there are a lot of people who do not believe they have a story. And I've developed a little bit of an expertise peeling back the onion layers, and there's always a story. I'm a lawyer, I'm a nice lawyer, but I do wills and trusts. And people will say, oh, there's nothing interesting about my life. And all of a sudden, you're just going, oh my goodness. It's really, it's a miracle. And I feel like I'm on sacred, holy ground. I have a question out of the blue for you. This popped into my mind. What's your opinion of obits that are written by the person who is about to die, or it's not written by a third party? I'd just like to hear your comments.
I love that. And the most memorable ones of the self-written ones that I've read or shared online have been women. And I feel like it's an opportunity for them to claim their voice in maybe a way that they weren't able to when they were alive. Some of them are, like I said, some of them are poignant. One woman's that I shared not too long ago, she listed a lot of her regrets and what she would have done differently. And I just loved that. One woman's that I read, she was a DJ and she really wanted to focus on what her funeral death party playlist was going to be. She said, here's what you're going to hear at the after party, basically, and listed all the artists. And so, yeah, I love it. I think what a gift to your children, because oftentimes an obituary is written in the heat of the moment. You're drawing on creative skills that you may not feel you have. And so for someone to have that ready-made, ready to go in their own voice, no ambiguity, no chance of misconstruing anything, I think that's an enormous gift. Are you considering writing your own? Have you done that?
Oh, I'm going to have my daughter do it.
Okay.
My own personal preference is I like somebody who's skilled first and foremost, but I would love to write it for me. And I know that there'll be some fun stuff in there. And I've written a handful myself for my mom and dad and grandmothers and, a few other people, and it's a real challenge. And I go at it very seriously. I just want to try to create a picture, a realistic picture, and along the lines of is I want you to feel like you wished you had known that
Mm-hmm.
person. Now, one thing is, after reading and writing hundreds of obituary, what patterns do you see? What actually matters at the end of life? Do you have strong opinions about that, Mary?
Yes. Yes. In fact, one of the mantras of Tips from Dead People, this tip that keeps coming up again and again, is that the little things are the big things, which sounds kind of hokey, but what you gather from reading all these obituaries is things that society told you were important: your house, your car, your resume, your bank account, your looks. If I just take the obituaries that I love as a data set, those are not important at all. They're almost never mentioned. I mean, the jobs, yes, I guess, but what comes across as true richness is the practical jokes, the vacations, the foods they love, they didn't, the accidents, the things they overcame. Those types of details leave you with the feeling that you wish you could have some of that person's spirit. You wish you had the esteem that they had. It isn't the superficial stuff. And it isn't just that people write obituaries by and large when they're old or for someone who's old, that you have that perspective. It's like, I think we can develop that perspective even now. And I think one thing that I always pull from this is that finding your passion is terrible career advice for young people, because I can see from these obituaries that people who have zigzaggy careers, people who didn't find their passion in the classic sense, can still have an amazingly full and interesting life. One doesn't have anything to do with the other. So it boils down to the relationships, the little things, the foibles, the humor, all that kind of stuff. To me, that's elevated way beyond the stuff that society, in its interest in conformity, tells you are important along the way. And I will say, just personally, I've always been kind of a competitive person academically, and kind of work hard, go for this, get the awards and so forth. And as someone who never really found her work passion, I've always done great at my jobs, but I kind of thought there has to be more. And spending time in these obituaries has kind of healed a part of that competitive brain that has always really bothered me. Because I just genuinely believe a lot of that stuff doesn't matter. Yes, it's great. Love your job, do well at it, provide for your family, all that kind of stuff. But if you make that the be all end all, the way that you judge your life, then I feel like there's something missing.
Yeah.
And if reading obituaries of damaged people like Trish can heal a competitive brain like mine, I believe it can do the same for everybody. And that's part of what keeps me going.
That's a beautiful concept that, not only are maybe we're healing interfamily conflict or issues, but what if we had really great impact for other people? I mean, that's candidly why I want to do what I'm doing with the Grandpa channel. And I'm pretty sure, not trying to put words in your mouth, but that's what you're trying to do with all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a theme of what a good life is that you've been, after reading all of these, and that's kind of the residue that's stuck around in your brain? How would you summarize succinctly, or not so succinctly, what a good life is based on these obits?
It seems to me that human beings crave a single piece of knowledge. They want to know that their life mattered. And in a world that values clicks, numbers, algorithms, dollar signs, degrees, titles, if you are not succeeding on that traditional ladder, it's very easy for people to fall into a little pit of despair or depression, to say that, my life wasn't all that big and it may not matter in the long run. But I think people have a need to know that their life mattered. And to me, when you get into the details of someone's obituary, when it's not just a airbrushed template, it matters to all of us. I read an obituary recently of a woman from the South who had no traditional career accomplishments, but She had this abiding interest in the different iterations of Coca-Cola. She's from Atlanta. And so her obituary was largely a report on her annual taste tests of all the different kinds of Coca-Cola. And she would put it in spreadsheets and come up with different conclusions as to which one tastes better. It was always traditional Coke in a glass bottle.
Yeah.
I read that and I was like, that's, to me, like, put that next to the obituary of Neil Armstrong. Equally important. That matters. She's hilarious. And I envy that. I envy that someone saw that in her. And I envy that she pursued that with the same passion that other people pursue getting bigger houses or whatever. And so to me, that's the good life. Like, if you can settle into the notion that where you are is okay, you're doing your best and that's fine, and that you matter because these tiny little things matter.
And as a reader of such obituaries, I don't know about you, but I feel courage. I feel, I feel renewed. And if it's a really good one, I've got a smile on my face as I'm reading between the lines, because you can't say everything.
No, that's me too. That's absolutely me too.
Sometimes what is not said is, I would love to have, I have a follow-up question, please, but they're dead.
Yes, exactly.
But they have kids that are still there, but I just think that at the very best, an obit can be extremely inspiring, and it can be inspiring in the sense that it's a cautionary tale, or it's inspiring, like, I could do that. I can make some changes, I can be better at this and intensify and fortify my relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's kind of turn to older people, older grandfathers. I'm 70, and just turned 70 a few months ago, and so I've got mortalities hitting me head on here. But when you read obituaries of older men, and it sounds like maybe women are better, would you say men's obituaries or women's obituaries are more interesting?
I think that I don't think there's a way to say. It's really too individual. But I will say, when a woman's obituary goes viral, it's generally because that person flouted convention in almost every sense of the word. With men's, you have a lot of rogues and funny ones and smart and very literary ones and stuff. But because we're used to seeing the gamut of men's personalities in all of our art, and not so much with women, those are the ones that tend to surprise me a little bit more, I would say.
Yeah.
I think in terms of the grandpas, I had an opportunity to test this theory that I have recently, because I've always had this theory that an honest to a fault obituary can be a healthy tool for grief for the ones that are left behind. That is, if someone dies in your world and you have a basically AI written, cliche filled obituary, or you have one that spoke about the real vulnerabilities, sometimes the failures, quote unquote failures, and the little things that I like, the things that I was talking about. Which of those are you going to go back to in your 3 a.m. I miss them so much moments? And I feel like it's not the ones that were just produced in the heat of the moment and don't feel that true to who don't feel true to who that person was. I think it's going to be the other ones, and I have found that to be true over these last couple months with my mom's obituary, that I keep it open in a tab on my phone and my computer and my iPad, and I read it at least once a day, and that's been helping me. I also think in terms of grandpas, you often kind of idolize your grandpa, and it may seem scary to put in an obituary some of the things that maybe you weren't so proud of or your family wasn't so proud of. But in terms of showing your grandkids that humanity is inherently flawed, all of us, no exceptions, I think that's a valuable, brave thing to do, to include the hilarious things, the wisdom, the morality, if you want to, your ethical message to people. But also, this was something I wasn't proud of. This was a struggle that we overcame and may not have made the right choice, but we did the best we could or whatever. If that's a message that your grandkids might read 30, 40 years from now and help them in their own life, I think that's an incredible gift.
Yeah, I do too. I think, for instance, my dad's obituary, one of my favorite lines in there, he grew up largely unsupervised. his dad was an alcoholic, and I wrote that he had his first cigarette at the age of 5, which is true.
Wow.
And then I wrote that he kicked the nicotine habit at age 7. So,
I love that.
and you have to know my dad. But he told me these stories, and those were his words. And I kicked the nicotine habit when I was 7.
He said it that way?
He did, yes.
My God, I love that.
He was just so funny. But I just find such inspiration from goofy stories like that, because what kid, like you've said a couple of times, what all of us are flawed, and how do we get through life, sort of thing. And he did, notwithstanding a dad that he never felt like he had any sort of a relationship with it. But and some of those things, when I read Obit, Mary, that has kind of not the views from the dark side, but a realistic side of what life was like growing up, I'm absolutely fascinated by that.
Me too. It's so countercultural to memorialize mistakes and flaws and family cracks and so forth. And not that you need to go seek that, but it's brave and it's important, I think. And I'm very much drawn to it. Back when my mom was editing the obituary page for our hometown paper, the editor of the whole paper suggested that the Sioux Falls paper start headlining their obituaries like the New York Times. Like, of course, in the New York Times, it would be like Nobel Prize winner dies. So my poor mom was tasked with headlining these Sioux Falls, South Dakota obituaries. Like farmed many acres was one that she used many times. But at Christmas that year, she had us go around the table and say what the headline for our own obituary was. And I was a kid. I was a kid, so I don't remember mine. But for hers, she said, never got hair right. And it's sad that she would think that of herself. It was a little bit true, not gonna lie, but it was very much her, very self-deprecating. And I used that story actually in the eulogy at her funeral. But it makes me think that for your dad, or no, was it your dad or your grandpa, like kicked nicotine at 7, that would be the kind of headline that I would immediately dive into. Like, this is my new favorite.
Or one headline I just thought about just 2 seconds ago was "Smartass son dies at age 82" or something. So you sort of capture, some fun stuff, I think. If you were, if you had all of these people come, I don't know whether you believe in life after this life. I do. If you had all these people come back, and maybe one person was designated as a spokesperson, and they would say, and let's narrow it down and say that it's for grandpas. And, somebody came to you and said, this is what I wished I had done. And if more grandpas had insured, or who was writing the obit, sometimes it's the grandpas, mostly not. But, what is it that I would want my grandkids to learn from my life, succinctly? And maybe, are there patterns? We've talked a little bit about the patterns of a good life, but, a grandpa's good life. You've probably read thousands of grandpas from various viewpoints.
Yeah. I guess the first thing that comes to mind is that, gosh, it sounds kind of hokey, but that the mistakes are an important part of the journey. That when I've read obituaries of interesting grandpas that I would want to emulate, or that just it's a well-told story, I would say it's almost always full of unexpected pivots. And it's not just like, oh, I had the good fortune to meet my spouse, or I had the good fortune to get into med school, or whatever. It's real unexpected things. Like, I thought I was going to do this, but then I got polio, and then here's how the ability to not beat yourself up about getting off the path here and there. I think would be, oh man, if all young people could have a model of that, and it's not just resilience, because that's like kind of a trendy thing to talk about, grit and resilience. It's more just like knowing that it's part of the package, that we are all going to get bumped off the path, and that's thoroughly okay. This isn't a grandpa, it's a grandma, but I recently read an obituary from a woman who she wrote her own, and it was basically like, life is absurd, it's silly, here's a few examples, and she gave some kind of like personal health things that were sort of embarrassing, but also some really silly things from her life. And the thrust of it was like, don't stop laughing. Like, the world is going to tell you to stop laughing, don't stop laughing. And I love that part of it too.
Yeah.
But for men and boys, it seems like there's so many expectations to be like, go get them, set your goals, and you can do anything you want. And if they had a message that it may take you a few years longer, and there may be some pit stops that you don't expect, and that's part of the story. No,
Enjoy the
that'll be
journey.
a gift.
Why are stories, just kind of on a general level, that we find in obits and when people tell them to us, small and specific ones, why are they so central to how people are remembered? I read obits that just have a list of graduated here, worked
Mhm.
here for 35 years, kind of. And I quickly scan through most of that stuff because that's not what I'm really interested. But I think that obits have this inherent power. And I think part of it stems from stories. But tell me
Mhm.
your thoughts on stories as relating to, the obits that you've read over the years.
The word story is in danger of being like suffocated by marketing, but it still holds true. Are you familiar with Humans of New York?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so I've been a longtime fan of him, Brandon Stanton,
Mhm.
and he just started by he started just doing photographs of people in New York, and then he started throwing in these provocative questions too, and the questions are what threw him into this stratosphere. He was the biggest thing worldwide on the internet at some point, and people have sent him all around the world now to do humans of fill in the blank. And recently, I don't know if you saw this, but Grand Central Station gave over every single advertising space and the central part of Grand Station to a Humans of New York exhibit.
Really?
And there were people, so it's like $3 million a day worth of wall space. And there was some things projected on the wall and the ceiling. And every single one of the things was a non-famous person. And it was the stories that he tells on Facebook and Instagram and in writing projected writ large all over Grand Central Station. And I think by the end, there were like 7 million people that had gone through the exhibit. There's something very, very powerful about a story that isn't corporatized, it's so specific and weird that you cannot make it up, that is the great unifier. People from all points across the political spectrum follow Humans of New York because those are very, very real stories. I don't even know how he gets such real information out of people. But I have a political point of view, but I don't really share it on social media. And I can see from my 200,000 followers that they're all over the map politically. And for the most part, my comment sections are kind. It's part of the ways that I frame it, the way that I frame the obituary, and that I don't include really inflammatory things. But regardless, the internet can be a brutal place. And I have not found that to be true in my comment sections, even the ones that get millions and millions of views. Every once in a while, someone will say something like, who are you to give opinions on other people's lives? And it's like, well, that's fair, but you don't need to follow me. But I think there are very few places left in our society right now where people with opposing viewpoints can meet and actually have a fruitful conversation about something. And it's because it's a story. And so if we are to develop empathy for people across the world and in our own neighborhood, up, down, horizontal, whatever, how can you do that without personal stories and putting ourselves in each other's shoes? And I'm kind of backing into this realization, but it's like, wow, this is happening on Tips from Dead People. And the obituary, the story, is the vehicle, because people get a pass slightly when they're dead for mistakes and foibles and things like that. And the story can just sit there as is without a lot of judgment. So anyway, I hope that answers that question. But I mean, I'm like a full believer in the power of storytelling.
What advice would you have to not dead grandpas about stories and storytelling to their grandkids and even to their kids? My kids don't know everything about me. I'm a pretty open book, but they don't know everything about me. And there would be some things that might be kind of surprising. Nothing that the statute of limitations hasn't, made a clear path for.
Safe to share.
Safe,
Yeah.
safe harbor there.
I'm trying to think of my grandpa as an example. I knew him as kind of a community hero and a well-loved person. And I don't think I ever really knew a side of him that expressed doubt or insecurity or regret over things, because we just didn't have that kind of relationship as much as I loved him. And I just think that would be such a great gift. I think especially for boys who are being socialized online a lot of the time right now, to have these real examples of regrets from a human that they love and respect, I think would be a huge gift. It takes some bravery, though. Like, I have old childhood journals and stuff, and I want to ditch those. I don't really want my kids to go through those.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be journals. It could be just the way you tell certain stories. Like, I want you to know that it's like, from my point of view right now, it seems like I've had a very successful career, but I want you to know that there was a time when I had doubts, and I want you to remember that, or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. This is a more personal question. We're coming down the home stretch for you. What have you learned as the Obit lady that helped you deal with the death of your?
A long time. So my mom was on hospice for about 10 days, but she had been sick for a few months before that. And I kept saying to my sister, I don't know why I haven't cried. Like, I feel like I should be crying all the time. Like, I adored my mom. She was so, so, so important to me, and a mentor, friend, everything. And we could tell there was only one way this story was going to end. It wasn't going to get better. And we knew that over the course of last summer. And I started thinking that I wonder if immersing myself in the stories of others, people who've had it worse, people who've told funny stories, like the totality of all of them. I must read, I don't know, 50, 75 obituaries a week. The totality of all of that makes you realize that you're tiny, you're a blip, we're all a blip. We'll be lucky, like I said, if we're remembered in 3 generations, very, very lucky. Most of us won't be. So go for it, essentially. Go for whatever you want, because who's the judge? But I think that immersing myself in all those stories all the time kind of gave me some strength or some resolve, or placed myself in a context of worldwide. Like, everybody's got a story, everybody's got an obituary, everybody's got like tragedy and success in their life, that made it easier. I guess it made us smaller in a way, and I don't know, it just felt like a healthier response. Not to say I've cried plenty since, but I think that thinking about myself as one of many, many, many people who are going through similar things with amazing parents and sudden or prolonged deaths, that it made me feel better knowing that I was in the midst of all these stories. I still think that's true.
That's a great answer. What do you hope someone feels when they read a really good obituary, Mary?
I feel like it would be like the same feeling that you get after reading a novel or watching Downton Abbey or whatever, your art of choice. I think if you can feel that way about another person's life, then what you've been shown or what you've been given is the amount of detail that got you to feel that way. The turns of phrases and the facts that were chosen to share. It feels like everyone's life is a little short story, not to elevate it too much. But I think if people can feel that way, like, this was a funny short story, this was a sad one, that's just a gift. We all need more of that. We all need more art, and these just happen to be real stories. So if you can feel the same way you feel after consuming a television show or a book or whatever, I think that's success right there.
I would like to think that reading obituaries, because I love reading them, somehow increases our ability to feel empathy.
I like to think that too. I'm betting on it.
I'm hoping. Yeah, and I think that heaven only knows this world needs a lot more empathy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe this is kind of the obit is kind of an interesting, not necessarily a battleground, but a platform or a venue where we can kind of put down our dukes, so to speak, and really think about people coming from different backgrounds, different physical and mental challenges that we haven't had, and we can kind of stew in those juices. I just think it's really a cool thing, and I just absolutely love what you've done. And you are I don't tell this to many people, but you are a fountain of wisdom. And I think you have that fountain of wisdom is both ingrown and as you've been raised by wonderful parents. But I just think that reading all these obituaries has really it gets you to think, doesn't it?
Mhm.
At least I find,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, and I 100% endorse the idea that this could increase people's empathy quotient for the world, but also for ourselves. Sometimes I'll think, oh, I don't want to go swimming today. I don't like how I look in a swimsuit or whatever. But then I'll read obituaries of these crazy women who by no means would conform to like traditional beauty standards. Would I want them to not go swimming? Like, ugh, we're so cruel to ourselves sometimes. And if you can read these obituaries and apply the same kindness and empathy that you feel toward those people to yourself, ugh, for young people especially, that would be a huge gift.
it'd be a huge gift. Well, I want to thank you for coming. Do you have anything else that you're just saying, oh, I wish Steve would ask me about this, or is there something else just on the tip of your tongue, Mary?
No, but as a former video producer, that was the question that always got the best answers. But no, I feel like we've had a great, far-ranging conversation. I would love it if people send me their good obituaries. They can be in touch. And I don't know. I'm just so grateful to meet the people that I've met through this journey, including you and your daughter. And I want to stay in touch and talk more.
Likewise, from our angle. And I think what you're doing is so needed. And it's like a salve for troubled souls. We live in troubled times right now.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for making time for us. And thank you for watching this interview with Mary McGreevey. Now, do you have a book that you're thinking about or anything you want to say?
I'm working on a book, and if you follow me on any of my platforms, I will certainly let people know the details as they emerge. But I'm trying to practice writing on Substack. But otherwise, I'm on Instagram and TikTok are my main platforms. But I think I'm going to add Facebook. And I think if you are interested in having me speak, one of the great blessings of this journey has been that different groups, healthcare executives and librarians and HR people have had me come speak to their groups to talk about appreciating the individuality through these lessons from obituaries. And people love it. People are always coming up afterwards. I got to tell you a story of this. I got to tell you a story of that. It's just something unusual and different. And I've found that I really enjoy doing it. I never thought of myself as a public speaker, but I have loved connecting with people that way. So I don't know if that's of interest to anyone too. I'm here.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Sure, it's snowy. In Minnesota, you've got what, 5, 6 feet of snow outside.
It's true. I can't lie.
We're not having a lot of snow this winter so far, but we'll probably get some. But thanks again for coming on.
Yes, my pleasure. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye. That's it for this episode of the Grandpa Channel. If you laughed, cried, or remembered something worth passing down, share it with a friend. Or better yet, send it to someone who needs a nudge to hit record with their grandpa. We're on a mission to help families capture the good stuff. Stories, wisdom, and wild card moments worth remembering. Until next time, keep the mic hot, the memories fresh, and the jokes just slightly inappropriate. I'm out of here.